Islamic law in the days since they took the city. Now, they keep saying extreme, by the way. This is just a little point that I want to work through for a moment. It's not extreme. It's really just more textual. It is fundamentalist, perhaps. But to call it extreme would be a judgment that is absent of the textual justification for all of this. They say this is what is said in the Quran. And by the way, they can point to the specific passages in the Quran or in the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, which are supposed to have the force of divine scripture as well, even though they all disagree on which Hadiths mean the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad as written down as part of an isnad, which is a chain of who heard it from Muhammad, right? It's like my cousin Bill heard it from my friend Bob, who heard it from his sister Susie. And Muhammad told her. That's the isnad, except those aren't the names that they would have, but you get the idea. Who heard the Prophet Muhammad say this? And then they debate on what is acceptable and what is not. However, of course, it's all the final revelation, and it is supposed to abrogate all revelations that came before it. That's the claim that the Islamic text and Islamic jurisprudence makes for itself. Just remember that. Everything that came before, yes, that had validity, but only as a means of getting to the final revelation, which is what the Quran has to be. And then the Hadith surrounding that. And the fact that there are thousands, literally thousands of Hadiths, and they pick and choose, and they can't determine which are which, and there's no central authority, but they're all, you ask them, and the Hadith is divine, even the ones that apparently people ignore or that contradict each other. But back to what's happening inside of Mosul now and other towns around it. The militants led by the ISIS are imposing this extreme Sharia law. That's what they're calling it, extreme Sharia law. The 16-point document they have announced the prohibition of selling and consuming alcohol and drugs, as well as smoking. They forbade gatherings of people. They forbade carrying weapons. Women are not to wear revealing clothing and to keep to their homes. Quote, shrines are to be destroyed. The statues of poets, for example, are being destroyed. This is classic. They have an anti-idolatry fixation in Islam. This is why, this is the kind of stuff that gets me in trouble. But I remember when I was in Turkey, I'm going around looking at all these mosques, and I was there with a friend of mine from the State Department, and isn't this amazing? I said, well, it's big. It used to be a Byzantine cathedral. I kind of wonder what the artwork was like in that before it was all destroyed, and it basically turned into a giant hall with tile mosaics everywhere, geometrical mosaics. I mean, you see a few squares mixed with a few circles, mixed with a few rectangles, and you've seen them all. But I digress. I know we're supposed to say, oh, the architecture, it's all amazing. Well, yeah, the architecture is great. That's what they stole from the Byzantine Christians. And the insides of those things are like, they give you the sense, and this is just the truth, they give you the sense of a hollowed out carcass of a Christian church, which is what they are, actually. Speaking of which, Abu Ramzi, one of Mosul's Christians who did not flee the city, he said that militants destroyed a statue of the Virgin Mary in front of a church. That's not surprising at all, is it? I wonder how many Christian riots there'll be around the world. I wonder how many Christian mobs will decide to murder innocent Muslims or just bystanders for no apparent reason because of the destruction of the answer is none. Oh, how do I know that? But all religions are the same. It's all the same. We're not allowed to make any distinctions, right? That's what we're told. Faith is faith, say the people in this country who have none. But keep this in mind as well, that not all the residents of Mosul are necessarily opposed to these militants. That's sort of the clever, cute way of saying it. And that spills over even into my verbiage. You read militant so often, and you say, well, why can't we say jihadist or terrorist? They're waging jihad. I think saying jihadist would actually be a more accurate description of them. In fact, I know it would be. But AFP and the AP and all these other supposedly sanitized and objective news sources, and we'll refer to them as militants because, one man's militant is another man's HuffPost writer. I don't know. But there are some people who are saying that these ISIS fighters who are in Mosul, who are taking over large parts of the country now, essentially what we used to call when I was in the CIA, Sunni land. That's how we referred to it. There are Sunni areas of the country, primarily the provinces of Nineveh, Anbar, Saladin. Those are the main strongholds of Sunni Arabs inside of Iraq. Baghdad, of course, is mixed. It is primarily Shia, though, which is why I don't believe it will fall. But you see, these areas currently under ISIS domination, because they're Sunni, there is a general support for them, a generalized support for them. Not all Iraqis share it, of course. Not all Iraqi Sunni Arabs share it. But some do. Quote, the gunmen in Mosul are decent people. They are treating residents well, said Abdullah, a woman who was among 500,000 people who fled the city in the wake of the militant takeover. We're not leaving because of them. We're leaving because the government is bombing and has cut the electricity and water in Mosul. To be honest, I'm happy they took control of Mosul. I see them as rebels, not gunmen, and I think they will make the city better. Remember that about all of this. As we have now the administration saying, if we can just get them to sit around a table together and form some kind of new government, if we can find some way for us to come together with the Iraqi people and these different factions, if they can just get along. The point is they can't get along. The point is ISIS doesn't want to get along. They want to kill people. They want to institute Sharia. They want to create a caliphate. This goes beyond realpolitik. This goes beyond articles in Foreign Policy magazine and all the rest. This isn't just about local or even regional politics. They think this is a divine mission. Understand that. Now, I know people would say, well, come on. They just pretend that they're actually cynical in this. It's a ploy. Well, some are. Some aren't. And just because someone thinks they're on a divine mission doesn't mean they can't also be cynical in the process, as we've seen so many times. But I've got so much more for you on this. The Shia, by the way, the Shia Muslims inside of Iraq are rising up. Mobilizations are occurring on both sides of the sectarian divide. What will that lead to? Most likely a complete and utter bloodbath. And if that happens, there is no U.S. force. Understand the difference here. We've been to this place before right now of Sunni and Shia inside of Iraq squaring off against each other in preparation for a civil war. They went there in 2006. The difference was the most well-equipped, most well-disciplined, fiercest fighting machine in the history of the planet was in that country to bring them back from the abyss once they decided to jump into it. We're not there now, though. And you know what? Both sides, I think, feel like they have quite the score to settle. And I don't just mean both sides inside of Iraq. I mean Sunni and Shia. And you can take that dispute back to the immediate period of the Rashidun, the rightly guided caliphs, after the Prophet Muhammad himself died. The schism between Sunni and Shia, it can actually go back to there. The Shia who were martyred, and the Shia who were partisans of Ali. That's why they call themselves Shia, Shiat Ali. They're the partisans of Ali, Ali who was martyred because of his difference with the Sunni line of succession. Crazy sounding maybe to us now. Come on, don't they just want the lights on, the electricity? They want water, they want schools. Don't they just want Common Core for their kids? I mean, come on. No, actually they don't. All of them I can't speak for, but the forces that matter, those on the ground who are determining events, they want to fight this thing out. And you know what? We're not going to stop them. What does that mean? More on that in just a minute. The broad voice lines are open. I want to hear from you, Team Buck. 888-900-3393. What do you think about all this? Well, we're going to hear about what Obama thinks in a minute when he talked to Mika from MSNBC. Back in a minute.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
Buck Sexton Show. Speak your mind. 888-900-3393.
Team Buck, the broad voice lines are open, as you just heard, 888-900-3393. Any questions, anything you want to, any comments, ideas, poems, haikus, anagrams, I don't know, whatever you got. Call in on the broad voice lines. We got Curtis from Pennsylvania. Curtis, you were on the Buck Sexton Show.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
My question to you. It's been 6-8 months ago when the Obama administration was trying to arm the Syrian rebels. My question is this ISIS group the same people who were rebelling in Syria? I figure you might be the guy to ask this question. I tried to get on another show, and I wasn't sure. But, I mean, if these are the same people, this would show such a ridiculous lack of judgment by the administration, beyond the scope. I mean, that's just beyond anybody who should be more empowered than their local dog catcher to make a decision like that.
Curtis, the answer to, and you shouldn't speak about Joe Biden that way. Curtis, the answer to your question is, I don't know why I think of him when I think of a dog catcher, but actually, could you see him playing this sort of menacing dog catcher in a Disney movie? He's like, come here, you dag nabbit poodle or whatever, Anyway, it's just now I'm starting a cartoon in my head. So, Curtis, the answer to your question is yes and no. Yes, perhaps it was similar groups that received maybe covert aid from the Obama administration or overt aid. It depends on which kind we're talking about. We did send them MREs, I think body armor, some other stuff. We're big on sending MREs because that'll win the battle. But they also are somewhat different, and it's not clear whether they are these specific groups that are across there are exactly the same as the people that we were working with because we weren't open about who we were working with. It's definitely not the Free Syrian Army. There are these distinctions. But, Curtis, this was all very much something that we could have assumed was going to happen based upon the space the jihadists created for operations, for planning, and for gathering war-making material inside of Syria. And also recruits from all over the world. Keep in mind, they've been bringing in jihadists from all over the world for years now.
Yes. Well, obviously the people who we backed in Egypt were not the good guys. The people we backed in Libya were not the good guys. And we're not really sure who we were backing in Syria. But now that this has cropped up out of Syria and northern Iraq, it just struck me that I didn't hear anybody bring that question up. And that was just something I thought would be worth looking into.
Well, it absolutely is, Curtis. Thank you very much for calling in and raising it to our attention. The Obama administration rightly understood that it would be a very complicated task to try to separate out the so-called good anti-Assad fighters from the bad anti-Assad fighters. And where do we draw the line? And what do we do if we find the good guys and they share munitions, they share shoulder-fired missiles, anti-tank rockets, whatever, with the bad guys? We're going to say, don't do that. They're fighting a war. I don't think they care much what we say. But now we have, under President Obama's time in office, just as with Jimmy Carter, we lost Iran, and we have felt the ramifications of that for decades. It seems now that President Obama's legacy is going to be the creation of Al-Qaedistan in the Middle East. More in a minute.
Buck Sexton, the Blaze Radio Network.
This is the Buck Sexton Show.
You may have seen this already on Twitter. There's a map going around because ISIS, the Al-Qaeda offshoot, the Al-Qaeda splinter group, whatever we want to call them, the jihadists, it's all the same vision. It all comes from the same ideological place. They've released a map of what they believe their caliphate will look like, their 5-year plan, if you will. And I'm looking at it now, and it is essentially all of Africa down to the roughly maybe the region of the Central African Republic, what's now known as, what was Zaire and has now been broken apart into a bunch of different countries. Around that area of Central Africa is where they stop, the borders stop. But that means